Hello there, and hi, welcome everybody to this afternoon's LinkedIn live stream. Hi everybody, welcome. And I see a lot of people are joining us, so looking at the faces that I can see here in the application. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome again to this afternoon's LinkedIn Live from Virtual Space Hero. So we have people from LinkedIn joining, we have more people from Facebook joining, and this is all about the topic today. Am I the same person online as offline? And I'm really happy because this is a topic that I haven't really thought about that much because I've been working online for quite some time already. And it's really fun that a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, brought that topic up on LinkedIn. And I was also in one of his courses. My name is BarbaraCV, and I'm really happy and I'm welcoming you again here to this Virtual Space Hero LinkedIn Live. Hi, Vincent. Great to have you with us. You know that Virtual Space Hero is a platform for virtual enthusiasts or to-be's, and we are treating topics for all are about the virtual space. We do webinars, we do these live streams, we have a lot of literature and also a research project ongoing that the results are going to be available very soon. And one of the things that I've also been doing a lot in the past month, of course, are consultancies about how to do presentations online, how to move your classroom online. I've been in research and teaching online for many years. And one of the things that I did is I was also in a course a few months ago, and it was amazing. It was a course about how to give powerful presentation online. And it was one of the few courses, honestly, that I attended in the past years that was really powerful. And I'm really happy to welcome the founder of the Essential Workshops with me today on stage. Hello, Bogdan.
Hello, Barbara. Good afternoon.
Hi, Bogdan. It's so great to have you with us. Bogdan, you founded the Essential Workshops. You're a behavioral profiler and a digital psychology expert. So I think there are already so many things that we need to talk about just when you think about the two words that you gave me to introduce yourself. But I know that you're coming from a pretty different background because you're coming from neuromarketing, communications, social psychology, and you have been a program director, content creator, show producer, negotiator for many years. So you have a very diverse background.
Yes.
How did you come to the virtual space? How did that happen?
Well, you know, it's very interesting because for 17 years I've been in the events and production world. So, you know, working so much in productions, you do show productions. So you go into all the technical details that you need for a show, which is exactly the same thing you need online, right? When you go live. Then, of course, I was doing the speaker coaching with the speakers because you can have the best production in the world. But if your speakers, and that happens very often, the speakers are then, you know, all your production makes absolutely no sense because the speakers are. So I was always throughout my whole career in the corporate world because I'm out of there. I've always been kind of like the liquid, you know, between the parts, or I've been the mortar between the bricks, so to say. And I always made sure that I create the overall experience, or that I make sure that all the touch points that we create together create an experience. And of course, when you put all of that together, it kind of makes sense that as you go online, that mimics very much a show production because you have lights, camera, you know, content, sounds, and all of that. So that's pretty much how I went into the virtual world. I've always been very much interested in the virtual world because of behavioral science and behavioral psychology, and I'm very much interested in how people behave and why they behave, and you know, what is from the reptilian brain, what is from the limbic brain, neurocortex, how do we think, and so on. And of course, a lot of people think that online, just because you're in a little rectangular, they think that you get away with how you are and how you behave, which is absolutely not true. So it's fascinating because I find it fascinating to see people that I know for a very long time who pretend to be a totally different person online than they are offline. And even more, because, you know, it's not only 2 dimensions, it's 3. Because you are online, that's your online brand, presence, identity, behavior. Then you have your live online, which is what we do right now. And then you have offline. So actually, you can be 3 different personas. And I see this very often when someone is not different only online and offline, but also online, offline, and live online. And of course, if you're not the same person, if you're not the authentic self, and you don't portray the same personality, character, and behavior, then actually people will have quite an issue with that, because, you know, they will not perceive you as you know, one person.
Of course, because being authentic means that your actions and your words are congruent, or also the way you present yourself are congruent with what you present, with your beliefs, with your values, and so on.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for that. And I'm just seeing that there are so many people connecting from Germany, from Brussels, from Austria. Hello, everybody. Northern Germany, Brazil, Austria again, USA, Spain. And
Wow.
I do know Camilla is connecting from the Netherlands, and Vincent is connecting from France. So thank you so much for being with us. And let's dive a little bit into the topic, because I think that's super interesting. You're talking about 3 personas,
Yes.
and 3 people that you need to take, or 3 identities, or 3 ways on how you present yourself. And what is the biggest challenge that you see people are having when you talk about authenticity and when we consider the virtual space?
The loose ends, that's probably what I would call. And you know, the very interesting thing is, Barbara, every time when I bring the subject of being the same person online and offline, the first reaction of people is also, do I have to manipulate who I am online? So they see it from a negative perspective, when instead they should see it from a positive perspective. No, you need to make sure that you are the same person online as you are offline. And then every time when I talk about it, I always have someone saying, wow, so are you telling me that I have to delete certain traces so I have a pretty picture online? And I'm saying, no. Again, don't look at it from a negative perspective. Look at it from the actual aspect of it. And, you know, and I'll give you an example, because, you know, otherwise I'm known to be quite practical. I know people who are very much in control of how they pretend, and I'm really going to say pretend, how they pretend to behave in a professional environment. That's not really who the people are. Offline, I'm talking about offline. That's not really who they are. It's someone that they really tried, and they put a joker face and they portray that person, which is very far off from who they actually are, from a personality, from a character, and all that. These people go online, they go on LinkedIn, for example, and they make sure that they mimic that professional profile that they portray offline. They will mimic it online. So it means that they are the same person online and offline, right? But it doesn't mean that they're authentic. Now, how do I catch them? Because that's right. What happens is, these people do not understand that LinkedIn and Facebook is just your image and brand. That is not your behavior. Your behavior happens when you go on Amazon and you write a nagging complaint, when you go to KLM or to Lufthansa and you rant without thinking that there's another human being on the other side of the line reading it. The way you complain on forums, the way you attack people on Facebook posts. And that says something about your behavior. And very often what happens with these people who are so good at mimicking their image offline and online, they don't realize that when they go into comments or discussions, they forget to mimic that that portrayed behavior. And they show their true colors. And then it becomes very interesting. That's
and is
where
this what you call behavioral profiling? Is this what
yes.
you call behavioral profiling, right?
Yes.
So that's
yes.
why we come back to your sort of description that you are a behavioral profiler. Back. So we solved this riddle, to say so. And what do you do? What is your role, or what are people asking you, or what do you work with organizations on when it comes to behavioral profiling in the virtual space?
It's very interesting, and I'll explain why. We focus on, well, you know, I'm an entrepreneur, so actually I'm running a few different businesses. I'm very much into e-learning. We're launching a massive online a platform for online courses, which we're going to launch next week. I'm not here to promote anything, by the way. You know me very well. I'm not the type of person to promote. Join here. If people want to work with me, they will always find me. So I'm covering on a lot of different topics because I've always been a specialized generalist. So I've been fortunate to work with every industry, you know, every corner of the world, every culture, cross-culturally, cross-functionally. And I focus very much on what I call alignment. No, because I have, you know, quite some studies in psychology, neuromarketing, and behavioral science, and so on. I worked a lot into, you know, European Commission and so on to, track terrorists at events, unusual behavior and so on. I think it gave me a little bit of altogether developed on reading people. Sometimes reading people a little bit more than they kind of know themselves. And what is very interesting is that, of course, we developed different workshops on behavioral profiling, which is exactly this: is your online image and your live presence the same as who you are offline? We go into behavioral public speaking. How do you present neurotransmitters, emotions? How do you create rapport? And all these things online and offline. We go into negotiations. How do you negotiate? How do you approach negotiations? We go into stakeholder management. We go into executive presence, because executive presence is the same thing between, right? We're going again into authenticity. Executive presence is a really hot topic. So we touch a lot on these things. But how does this connect online and offline? Well, there's a few things. To give you an example, if I am to look into the behavioral profiling, it's not only that I literally go online and I start, finding people and, their traces on the internet, because again, that gives me a combination of behavior, some sort of behavior, a certain part of behavior, a situational behavior, if you want to call it, and then identity or brand. But for example, we add another element where, and we work with some neuroscientists here, where I will send you next to a Myers-Briggs or Jung personality test to see your personality trait and where you're coming from. I will also send you a form online, and you will go and you will fill this form. There are some combination of behavioral questions and situational questions and so on. And what happens is you will have to put your camera for a few minutes on while you do this test. What happens is that in the backside, we analyze the movement of your mouse. We analyze, so we have a machine learning software that literally reads your behavior as you are filling in that form. Yes, it exists and we are using it. We're working through, there you go. And we're not the only ones. Amazon is doing it, but we are doing it. We make them aware. So the difference between, I always call it, the dark side and the white side. We are always the white side.
You're on the white side, right? Yeah.
Yes. Always tell people, we want you to do this survey because we want to see how you react in a certain situation. We're going to come back and harvest that together. So it's for us to create more dimensions on how we get, how we can help them and how they can help us help them. You have a lot of websites that are using these things without telling their users. So we analyze the movement of the mouse. How do you click? Why do you click in a certain way? How long it took you until you answered? Why? Where did you look in the camera? Your facial movements, physiological changes, all of that goes together, and we can read your emotions. We can even see what kind of neurotransmitters have been developed in your brain and in your body as you are filling in that survey.
I just can't say what Sophia is saying. Whoa. Okay, because I think that comment fits like perfectly here.
Yeah. But again, you see, it's the difference between what we call the white side and the dark side. I have absolutely nothing to do with anyone who is doing it. Very well done. It goes into everything. It's the same thing as public speaking. You can use public speaking to inspire, to elevate, to motivate, or you can use public speaking to manipulate. Right? Because the way you present and the way you talk and how you are influential, you can use influence in a good way or in a bad way. And with everything else, what you have and the products you use are one thing, but the way you decide to make use of them and what you want to get from them can be either goes one way or the other, so to say. And then there's always a big gray area. But just to give you in a nutshell, to explain how we're helping people, because we combine a lot of different tools, online, offline, and of course, there's a lot of behavioral cognitive therapy. So we bring things from psychology, from therapeutical psychology, and the results are absolutely phenomenal and sensational, because you see transformation on people, and you see how their relationships develop with your coworkers, how their relationships develop, so it's very difficult to put your finger on. And that's why it's also, we never really sell it or promote it. It's usually people who say, there's something about you, I want to work together, I want to develop my communication skills, but I don't know how. And then usually we go through this thing, which is always personal and it's always different. So it's never the same. We never say, module 1, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Absolutely never. Also, it's not one of those things that take time, because I'm known to be highly effective. And I'm always saying, I don't want to waste people's times. or money, and also I don't want people to waste my time. So
yeah. So that I see a lot going on in LinkedIn as well, like promoting students to think about the LinkedIn profile early onwards during their studies already. And it's fun because when I think about my students, and it doesn't really depend on the country, many of them don't even have their LinkedIn profile set up while they're studying. I'm like, why don't you have that? LinkedIn or Xing, whatever it is in the German-speaking world. But so this is something very important. And just recently there was a post from a colleague of mine from Austria, Richie Pettauer, talking exactly about that, thinking about your LinkedIn profile early on as well to establish that for your career. But important to consider what it means working on your LinkedIn profile, what kind of identity or how authentic you are in that profile.
Absolutely.
Let me do a switch, a little bit of a switch, because I think that's a really important thing that Liliana was bringing up a few minutes ago. So Liliana considers or mentions the aspect of language. Language can determine her presence in a way. She feels that the way she expresses herself in running training in French or in English is not making her the 100% the same. And we had a few comments. Thanks so much, Liliana, for sharing your experience. And we had another comment from Nadine saying she feels the same about German and English, the two languages that she's currently teaching in. And also Vincent is saying something very similar. So that is fun because, so first of all, thank you very much to all of you for sharing your experiences, and please continue also ask us questions in the chat. We're going to pick them up immediately when there is a moment, the perfect moment for that. The question is, so what do you do with people who really have to be to work in different languages? So, for example, interestingly, I feel even more comfortable sometimes, or I feel definitely more comfortable even teaching in English or Spanish than I do with teaching in German, even though that's my mother tongue. But what do you think about that? The language and authenticity. So it would mean
should speak less.
Should what?
I think people should talk less.
Oh, were you talking about me now? Because I did such a long intro to my question.
Language. Have you read The Little Prince?
Years ago, yes.
Right. It's one of my favorite books. In The Little Prince, there is episode 21, which is by far one of my most favorite chapters ever. And the Little Prince is meeting the fox. Those who did not read The Little Prince, I warmly recommend you go read it. It's a small book, and it will completely blow your mind. And the Little Prince wants the fox tame him. If you want to connect together, you need to tame me, because I'm a fox and you're a human. So you need to tame me. And then the Little Prince says, I don't know how to tame you. What do I need to do? And then the fox says, at the beginning, you will sit next to me and you will say nothing. Words are the source of all misunderstandings. But then in time, you will sit closer and closer and closer to me until you will tame me. Same thing as it goes into language. We speak too much. We talk too much rather than feeling each other. We're talking about oxytocin, which is what we call the bonding neurotransmitter. Oxytocin is indeed developed through storytelling, but the way we connect with people and how we develop oxytocin is how we feel each other. And let me tell you, nonverbal communication is much more important than whatever someone is talking at you for 20 minutes. So I understand, Camila says that she loves The Little Prince, one of my favorite books as well. So I understand what you mean. And when it comes to English and German and English and so on, it is, of course, very difficult because we're going to linguistics and there's so much there. Interestingly enough, if you're looking into studies, you'll see that non-native English speakers will always understand each other better than English native and a non-English speaker. So we need to understand that we never really take in all the information that comes to us through language. What we take is how we feel through certain things that language brought. Context, storytelling. I'm going to one of my favorite books, Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Yeah.
So we need to understand that it's not the language that we use, it's the passion that we showcase as we talk about something, is the emotions that we put into something, is the context that we give to a specific example. And then language becomes a little bit less important. I'm not saying that it's irrelevant. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that it's irrelevant. I'm saying we're giving a lot of attention to things that we shouldn't give maximum attention, and we should focus a little bit on how we connect as human beings and how we establish rapport, and that is primary emotion, context, neurotransmitters. It is not language. And even if it comes to content, Only a small percentage is the actual content, because we're going into vocal and language, right? And the way we sound. I can speak in whatever language right now, and with my voice inflection and pauses and volume, you will feel what I want you to feel, and you will have no idea what I spoke about. We can even make we can even do a test. So language is important, but not that much.
Really, that's really fun, because of course context matters, but I do believe that, for example, as long as I wasn't very fluent in Spanish, I wasn't as funny in Spanish, meaning I couldn't be as authentic, because authenticity for being me means being funny, like me defining me being funny, of course, ha ha ha. Okay, you're not laughing. Okay, good. It was a self-joke. Self-runner, everybody's laughing in the audience. But anyways, the point is, so still I believe that language fluency, of course, also influences your authenticity.
But that, and again, you know, a lot of these things, some of the things that I'm saying are based on fact. In general, I prefer to work to talk based on fact and science and personal experience and you know, a lot of experience. I'm not the kind of person to come with my opinion is, and my opinion is, because, you know, if, yeah. What happens very often is,
you know, you're talking to a researcher, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but you know, what is very important here is, and I agree with you, in my native language, for example, I'm not as funny as I am in English. But it took me a lot of time to become funny in English to kind of be as funny as I used to be in my native English, in my native language. If I speak in Italian, for example, I'm considered funny. In French, not so much. In Czech, I can try to be funny, but Czech people will never get my humor. So of course, let's not forget one thing, because you're bringing humor. Humor, although universally valid, is culturally specific, and is one of the things that I always strongly advise people to be careful with, being humoristic in front of a group that they don't know, and especially being humoristic at the beginning of their presentation, because you might be perceived as funny by certain cultures, but you might be perceived as ignorant and insensitive by other cultures. And my question is always, do you want to start your presentation with being perceived as insensitive or ignorant, or even more, do you want to bring people together, or do you want to separate them based on how specific your humor will perceive by different cultures? And it goes back to white and black, and it goes back to all the things. My warm recommendation is always to focus on kindness, on helping each other, on the more you get, the more you give, the more you learn, the more you share. It's all about we are stronger together always. And if that's white or black, I don't know what you called it. Also, I'm colorblind, so I don't even see most colors. But if your intention and desire is always to do better, to help others, to motivate others, to pay it forward, then I think you're always going to go into a certain direction, no matter the language, you know, the situation, the context, and so on.
Okay, totally agree, absolutely. And we have a few comments, because I do know that in the audience there are a few interculturalists there, and also Liliana is saying again, culture doesn't travel across borders, and yeah, definitely be careful with humor, absolutely.
Exactly. Let me I cannot emphasize on how specific humor can be, and how insensitive we can be considered. You know, again, it's like sports. Sports is also universally valid, but sports is understood more or less in the same way by everyone across different cultures. Humor is not.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah, very culturally specific. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. Also, Brett is mentioning the context of humor can depend on cultural influence, experience of society, groups, and so on and so forth. Thanks so much to everyone for your contributions, but also ask us your questions. What do you want to know from Bogdan about virtual authenticity, which is indeed a term that I sort of thought he was using, but it's not really true, because virtual authenticity, I was Googling it, it just means the authenticity of digital records. But let's go back to talk about being authentic, or being you online, and being you online in a professional context. So for example, here we are on LinkedIn, we are on a professional platform, and there is one question that beforehand, so when I posted the event, somebody messaged me, and she did a few very interesting questions, intriguing questions, and she asked about vulnerability. So how vulnerable should you be online in a professional context?
With a lot of people who know me, they know this. Very often my favorite answer is, it depends. This is such a broad question when we go into vulnerability, authenticity, when we can talk about this for the next 40 years and we will never finish. So, you know, one thing that very much we need to understand online is that there is not a one size fits all. I will say that again. One size fits all does not exist online, and that is linked also to vulnerability. How I perceive vulnerability is different than how you perceive vulnerability, Barbara, and it's different than how your colleague perceives vulnerability. So when you ask someone, how vulnerable should I be online? I will say, what is vulnerable to you? What does it mean to you to be vulnerable? There's so, it's such a wide array, and but if you are a vulnerable person and you are totally open and you talk about yourself offline and you bring the same thing online, then you shouldn't worry. Because your approach offline and in the way you communicate with people, you bring it online and the same thing remains. So you shouldn't even think too much about it. The moment you think too much about it, my first question would be like, so are you trying to control your vulnerability online? Or are you just trying to validate your vulnerability versus what some people find as vulnerable and what, right? Just be yourself. And I think that's truly what vulnerability is. And being yourself and truly who you are, it doesn't mean that you should validate your vulnerability through what other things that it's proper on LinkedIn or not. Because again, we go into cross-cultural differences, some and specific industries, and different people, different memes, different stuff. It's a massive, massive, massive subject, and it goes to one of those very simple things which we learn in high school: just be yourself.
So it would also mean that the way I perceive vulnerability in an offline context, that's probably how I would also use it or display myself in an online context.
Once again,
the way I feel myself, or the way I show myself, the vulnerable I show myself in an offline context, that would be like how I should show myself also in an online context, to be authentic, if we come back to the topic.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we've already met, we haven't met face to face, but we met live a few times. And you're always the same person. You always say the same things. You always, maybe you feel differently. And it's normal that one day you feel in a different way, second day you feel in a different way. You're influenced by situation, context, and so on. So of course, maybe your approach sometimes will be different than other times. But again, we're talking here about a behavior, and behavior doesn't mean that you always do the same thing. No, we are human beings. We have 4 primary emotions. 1 is positive, joy. 3 are negative, anger, fear, sadness. So as you start combining that with, with the interactive experience and with the context, social, physical, cultural context, there's so much happening. But your behavior, even if sometimes you will be more negative, sometimes you'll be more positive, so your behavior is linked to the way you express yourself overall, specific words or expressions that you use overall, the way you support someone, no matter if you're in the spotlight or not, overall. So these are a lot of things that are coming, from your character, and again, that's what I'm saying. LinkedIn is not your behavior online. LinkedIn is your brand or your image. It's static, and you can manipulate it, and you can change. I mean, I'm changing the name in my profile. We are talking about it every week. That doesn't mean that I'm changing my character or personality or behavior. Behavior is so much more online, and I think this should be something that we really need to comprehend. Behavior is you going and ranting about an airline not giving you vouchers, or picking up the customer support and screaming at people who during Corona time were no longer working in a team to rant at each other, but each of them were working individually from home, and they got 300 calls from angry people screaming at them, sending them to the point of being depressed. That is behavior. And those things, if you put them online, they remain online, and I will find those things, and I'm not going to accuse you, but I'm going to come and I'm going to say, okay, you had that reaction at that point. Why was it?
It happens.
Was it a reaction? Then it happens, right? We're all stressed. We all have things. Was it intentional, or was it just situational? And that's how we go and we analyze a lot of things. Linked again, authenticity, and because online, a lot of people go on Facebook. Everyone's just like attacking each other, and on Facebook nobody listens to understand. People listen to reply. I'm never on Facebook, because if you want to increase your blood pressure, go on Facebook and start fighting with blind people. Nobody's willing to compromise. Nobody's willing to listen to each other's side. People are just going there to rant. And again, do you listen to reply, or do you listen to understand?
Let me ask you one question. So don't give, because I'm looking at the time, so it's 17:29. We have still like 9 minutes left. And course, we're going to pick up questions if I see questions coming in, but let me just first ask you a question. I saw a workshop that you're offering, and it's called behavioral profiling, as we're talking about it now. And you mentioned one question there in the description about the specific points behind how you were being perceived online. So now many of us, and I see also people who are joining the discussion, we are teaching or online, or are doing trainings online, or we have events online. So what are specific points that matter when we are online?
Again, it depends. We're going into a...
Oh, come on, give us a few things now.
Yeah. It's again, one size does not fit all. I think a lot of people forget the fact that because we are online, they think that as we are online, emotions no longer matter. That as we are online, people no longer feel different things. And that is not true. Also, people think that if you are, for example, if you are online, your body language is not that important anymore as it is offline. And we all know that because, you focus just on facial gestures and whatever you see in this frame. What people do not understand, however, and they think that the lack of body language is taken by content. That is a joke. No, it is taken by voice. Voice online matters the most. The way you facilitate, the way you play with your voice, the way you establish rapport, the way you build credibility, the way you pause, the way you pace, the way you increase volume, the way you whisper. All these things will change. I can whisper things to you right now talking about nothing, and I swear most people will approach the camera and you don't even realize that you approach the camera, right? Because you think I'm whispering to you. Voice is so fundamentally important online. You need to know how to play with your voice, to go up, down, and pausing. People don't pause online. We need to pause. The power of pausing is fundamental. And I'm not going to go into all the elements why our pausing is so important, but for as long as you are online reading from some slides, you'll continue to speak like this the whole time while you're reading from the slides, and it makes absolutely no sense and nobody understands. And we think that content is relevant online. We think that that's what people perceive. No, people will feel the voice. How we give them the feeling of confidentiality, of trust, of support, and all that. So let's become a little bit aware of the power of the voice, because it's all about vocal cueing. It's all about, and again, you feel if someone is, even if you're millions away from a person, if that person's voice is shaking, I guarantee you will get goosebumps. That's it. So, of course, there's so many different elements, but it's just literally getting some perspective on how we connect as human beings. And how we connect as human beings hasn't changed ever since we were Neanderthaler. We're still establishing rapport. It's still based on what we perceive. We're still extremely biased. The more we know, the more biased we are. And the only way how to fight bias is to pause, to try to be as rational as possible, right? And to say, okay, I'm biased right now. Do I really see this? Or am I convinced that I see this because of past experiences? Or am I not giving, going back to your study, am I not giving the phone to a black person, but I'm giving the phone to a white person? And I'm not going to go further than that because I always keep my, I don't want to go political or whatever and so on. But it goes back to that, how severely biased we are about everything which is gender, race, sexual orientation, religion, and so on. And the way we change that is by pausing, opening up to listen, to understand to each other, rather than just blurbing at each other and see who screams the loudest, because that's the one who is right.
The one who screams the loudest, or currently the one who invents the most fancy term for something that is out of the literature, out of the 80s or something. But that's good. Let me ask you one maybe final question. When in March the whole lockdown happened, and I also did a lot of trainings and workshops, particularly for professors going virtual with their classrooms, because I'm coming from academia. There were also, of course, trainers, but mainly academia there. And I do know that many of them felt super uncomfortable going online. So with some of them, I went the way that we record the presentation because it was just easier than going live, because that can be super scary if you never have been live. So we recorded, we did sort of a semi-live at the beginning, and then we went live. But I had the feeling with some of them, because I accompanied some of them and gave them feedback over the following weeks, that some of them never felt like comfortable being online. And there's also a lot of critique, the virtual space being not the place for a good bonding place, or that it's difficult to build up rapport. And we do know from global from global virtual team research as well, that of course it's easier to bond, to have a team belonging, to feel close if we have met. But I do believe that there are so many ways that we can also have a very good bonding and a very authentic and very good life experience online, but we're just not making use of it. And the last example that I want to give is, what I really love is, we've been running so many world cafes in the past weeks, particularly with Anna Selno, that is here as well. And I don't know what she loved, but she loved one of your sentences. I can just point that. I don't know what it was, but she loved one of your sentences. And Anna and me run a lot of world cafes where we were having our DJ with us. And that was an amazing experience, because people came into the room, there is music, there is the DJ, he's like doing fun stuff, we're all moving. And already through that, people get like much like, okay, that's a nice atmosphere. And of course, we are using a lot of interactive elements. But do you feel that the virtual space doesn't provide you with the possibilities to connect properly?
Let me answer with something else. When the phone was invented, people thought that it will take the soul out of human beings. Then when the television appeared, people said that the civilization will end. Then the mobile phones. Then it is our resistance to change as human beings. Also, we have been forced, I don't think that ever in the history of humanity have we been so rushed into a different environment. We have been rushed into online. So it is very understandable that a lot of people feel like this, because you have been forced to go into something that it was not in any way your field, and maybe it would have taken you months or years to get right. But we're also talking about human beings and the amazing power of adaptability. Now, ask the same people now how they feel online versus how they feel 3 months ago. And most people will say, maybe I still don't fully like it, but I kind of know how to deal with it. Because as human beings, we have an incredible power of adaptability. And what they experienced at the beginning is, of course, fear. And that fear comes from, you know, what we call the wonderful thing, which is called, people call it fight or flight, which is very wrong from a biological perspective, because it's not fight or flight. It is freeze, flight, or fight. But this is the order how it happens. First you freeze, then you fly, and then if it's the last scenario, you go into fight. So as we were all forced online, we all went to the first part of this amazing thing that comes from the limbic brain, which is freeze. And we all froze, and we try to kind of, you know, make our way around with all this online and digital, and emotions are not working, and it's not true. Is it different? Absolutely. Is it bad or worse or good? I don't know. History will tell us in 10 years from now or in 20 years from now. But instead of judging and trying to block it, let's try to be open and see what happens. So what people experienced was fear, freeze, and resistance. And in time, everyone adapted, of course. And again, you know, I'm a fan of offline. I love to hug my friends. I love to do one-on-one. I want to see people, hug people. I am a complete fan of offline, but that doesn't mean that I don't like the online environment just as much, because I try to do the best to adapt to the environment and to make the environment work for me rather than me adapting to the environment. And probably, and I would conclude with this is what I saw a lot with people online. They picked one Zoom or one Microsoft Teams, one whatever, and then they took whatever technical details or whatever that thing was offering, and then they modified their behavior, their content, their sessions to fit Zoom. No, technology is supposed to work for you. It takes so much to change from Zoom to Teams, from Teams to Slido. Use more tools. Make technology work for you, and you're going to succeed. But if you take technology and you adapt, or you try to change who you are because of whatever Zoom is giving you in their breakout rooms, I don't think it works like that. I think technology was invented for us to use it, not the other way around.
That is fantastic, and I think that's a super perfect closing statement. Like, don't let yourself be limited by technology. Also, something that I do talk a lot about with trainers and professors, because we can do so many fun activities online and be authentic, because we can do the same that we do in a normal classroom, but fold the papers, not being opposite each other, but being in the screens opposite each other. But we can still use those activities. And for those of you who want to dive deeper into the topic of behavioral profiling, it's super easy to find Bogdan online. Bogdan is the founder of the Essential Workshops. And also with this, we are closing after 40 minutes of knowledge bites. I want to thank to all of you, because I see there is still a lot of comments coming in. Thanks so much for the comments from Nadine and from Berta. I see you were discussing emotions, and also Vincent was saying something about how important it is, the visual cues that we are setting, of course.
Absolutely.
Bogdan, it was amazing having you with us. Thank you so much for being with us, and thanks for everybody joining our discussion. And you'll find Bogdan on LinkedIn. And for those who want to dive deeper into a virtual event, this Friday there is the ISCCM Global Virtual Conference that I'm chairing, and I'm going to post later on the link for the registration. Who wants to join this Friday, a half day of topics around the global virtual space. And it's amazing because we have a lot of interactivity there as well, interactive workshops that have been submitted. So thank you very much again. Thanks, Bogdan, for being with us, and have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.